Good night, girl. I'll see you tomorrow.
Your soul is mine.
Hello, welcome to my first build video for Elden Ring. Recently I've been playing more and more Elden Ring due to the recent announcement of the Shadow of the Erdtree DLC coming in June. And I've given a lot of thought on what kind of build I want to run through the game with, and I've come up with quite a few. This is only one of the builds I've come up with. I've been playing Souls games for a while now, and I put over 1,000 hours in Bloodborne and Dark Souls 3.
26 grams, 9%. Total sugar, 45 grams. Includes 25 grams of added sugars, 50%. Protein, 0 grams. Vitamin C, 18 milligrams, 20%. Not a sufficient source of saturated fat, trans fat, cholesterol, dietary fiber, vitamin D, calcium, iron, and potassium.
Let's get to it.
Okay, let's get started with the stats. So to do this build correctly, you have to start with Samurai. You got 59 Vigor, 11 Mind, 47 Endurance for light rolls, 12 Strength, and 75 Dex, and the rest is unleveled. If you wear the Crimson Hood, you get plus 1 point in Vigor, which brings your health up to 60. And if you use Millicent's Prosthesis, which is necessary for this build, you'll always get 5 extra Dex without leveling it. Now for the Wondrous Physic, you're going to be using Thorny Cracked Tier. This build is very combo heavy. You're going to get a lot of hits in, and this will boost your damage quite a bit. And you're going to have the Crimson Bubble Tier. In case you get into a tight spot, it's going to save your ass. Now let's get into the build setups. First up, we got our PvP build. This has an S-Stock with Keen Infusion with Blood Tax on it. Most of the weapons in this build are going to have Blood Tax, at least your primary weapon, that is. Your secondary is going to be a Clean Rot Night Sword with Lightning Infusion. Lightning scales with Dex, and it'll increase the damage quite a bit. Of course, I'm wearing the Crimson Hood to get my health up to 60. It's not really necessary, but I like that extra point. And for the talismans, I got the Godskin, Shrouding Cloth, Rotten Wing, Insignia, Millicent's Prosthesis, and the Spear Talisman. Now for the second PvP setup, we have a parry setup. The reason why we have a parry setup is in case you run into somebody trying to parry you. The problem with this build is it's very easy to parry. Somebody could parry you very easily. So for this idea, I brought up a Roger's Rapier, which has great combos, which I'll show you in a bit. And we have a secondary Rapier, which is Lightning Infuse. The original Rapier has 130 critical attack, which is great if you want to one-shot parry somebody. For the parry tool, any Ash 4 will do as long as it's a parry. We have the Frenzied Flame Seal with Catch Flame in case you have to chase anybody down. For the talismans, we have the Assassin's Crimson Dagger, Spear Talisman, Millicent's Prosthesis, and Dagger Talisman. Feel free to use this setup more if you prefer it, but I made this for counter parry. Now before I get into the PvE part of this build, there's a lot to talk about PvP. This build is a very punished focused build. And for that, there's a right way and a wrong way to play this build. So you have to master the art of fencing. Now I know that sounds awful, but trust me.
That shit good.
Let's get a rundown of some of the combos. So this is a feint R2. You perform it by holding R2 and then pressing circle before you launch the attack, giving you this backstep swing. Now if you perform a feint R2 like this and then press L1 and then L1 again, you do this nice little combo here. Very good for keeping aggression and faking out your enemies. It's also good for tricking barriers. This attack isn't necessarily a true combo, but it's actually a bait. And if you manage to hit it, that triple poke at the very end has insane range. Here's the second combo. You perform it by doing a feint R2 like this, R1, and then L1. This one has the most range and is best for closing gaps. Now we're moving on to the Roger's Rapier, and this one has the most hit potential. So as you can see, you perform it by doing a feint R2 like this, and then R1, and then R2 again. It's pretty nice. All these combos work best against weapons of the same size, like straight swords, rapiers, curved swords, and katanas. Now you might be asking, okay, so what if I fight a great sword or a great spear? Well, here's where the art of fencing comes into play. Now this is why light rolling is very necessary for this build. When you're fighting weapons with high hyper armor, poise, and range, you have to be able to get out of there quick. Now notice in this clip how I run to the right and very quickly circle around to the left and whiff his attack to get a punish. Now I'm pretty sure on his screen he hit me dead on, and this is due to latency. You see, on his screen I'm in that original spot I was running, but in reality I'm actually circling around him and whiffing his attack on purpose. This is called telegraphing, and I wouldn't recommend it unless you notice a high amount of latency. I would avoid this at all costs unless you really feel like it'll work. So if you ever used power stance straight swords, you would know about the punish. This is basically the same thing, but you have a lot more range and it's a lot more forgiving. Notice how I'm keeping my distance and waiting for him to attack. As soon as he attacks, I know I have the advantage of range and I can instantly punish him for making a mistake. This punish is simply done just by pressing L1 twice, and it's a very effective way to close distance and punish your enemies. It's basically the same concept for colossal greatswords. The only difference being is that you don't press L1 twice because these have a lot of hyper armor and you cannot break the poise very easily. So the way to do this is you play around your opponent's attacks. You light roll through most of everything, and you just dance around your attacks, occasionally attacking, waiting for your opportunity to strike, and as soon as you see that opportunity, you take it, just like that. Just from a simple standing L1, this can do a major amount of counterattack damage combined with the Spear Talisman. Now I'm sure you've noticed by now, but when I get a few attacks, you'll see this red aura radiate around my body and go into the center of my character. What this aura is my Godskin Shrouding Cloth proccing, which is going to heal me if I lose any health. This is very effective, and this is why I focus this build around life steal. The Godskin Shrouding Cloth combined with Blood Tax will heal you enormously, and sometimes in a match I won't even have to use my flask because I'm just constantly healing throughout the match. So in this clip you'll see I'm fighting a guy with power stance straight swords, which is a similar build to mine, but he does not have the advantage of range, which means I can outpace him and outrange him. Now over here, when you're fighting weapons this small, you can try to get more attacks in. See, you can do your running attacks, everything, you know, you're not really worried about keeping your distance, you're more focused on trying to get your kill. These weapons don't really come as much of a threat compared to when you have packing. So look what I do with Blood Tax here. Blood Tax is what you do to punish. You punish rolls with it, you punish whiffs with it, you punish anything with it. It is your ultimate punish. The only problem is if you miss it and you whiff, you're wide open. So you have to make sure you hit. Blood Tax combined with the Godskin Shrouding Cloth will give you a lot of health back. And if you play your cards right and you play carefully, you can regen all of your health back without ever having to use a flask. Now here's an example of some of those combos I mentioned earlier coming into play. Now these combos are mainly intended for baiting. You want to bait somebody into thinking, oh, okay, let me lower my guard, let me try to charge at him, or let me try to do this, when really you're going to outrange them, outspace them, and come in for that kill. Overall, I would say this is a very aggressive build, very focused on a sort of defense offense in a way. You know, you're avoiding attacks, at the same time you're baiting attacks and trying to get hits in. Now, I have to tell you that these are only the best clips I've given. I'm not exactly a god at PvP. I've gotten beaten quite a amount of times, but you know, at the same time, I think I'm pretty decent. So if there's any problems with the build, I wouldn't really say it's the build, it's probably me. I feel like if you put this build in the right hands, you can really be like just toxic, like untouchable, you know what I mean? I wouldn't necessarily say this is the best build I've made, but it's definitely my favorite. It's the most I put work into. I put a lot of thought, I put a lot of thinking into this, and it's the most fun I've had playing with a build on Elden Ring than I've ever really had with any of my other builds. It's very unique in a sense. I just really enjoy it. If you want to see clips of me using the parry setup for this build, I will be uploading that on a separate video where I just upload all the clips I collected for this video, so stay tuned if you want to see that. Also, you know, since you're playing really defensive and conservative, I would say your enemies will probably wisen up and just like try to keep their distance. Don't be afraid to chase them down. Just make sure you avoid their attacks, and plus, you know, when they're trying to run away from you, that's a great way to try to roll catch and, you know, get as many hits in as you can before they start playing defensive and start throwing swings at you. It's the best option you have. But now we're going to get into the PvE aspect of this video, and this build is amazing for PvE, especially for exploring large areas. It is chef's kiss. I'm highly considering running through the DLC with this build because I do like to explore a lot, and I feel like this would make it very easy to explore. It's also kind of decent for bosses for the amount of damage it does. So here's the PvE setup. It's basically the same thing, but the only difference is that I switched up a few of the talismans. This one is made for exploring large areas and just going around and looking for items, stuff like that. So I have the Godskin Shrouding Cloth, I have the Taker's Token, or whatever the fuck it's called, Millicent's Prosthesis, and the Ancestral Spirit Horn. So in this clip, I am demonstrating and testing out, showing you how much health and magic you can regen just with the talismans and just with the Godskin Shrouding Cloth. So I'm just running around getting as much kills as I can, and just trying to avoid hits, and you can see I'll be generating quite a bit of health. It's pretty good, honestly, if you don't want to waste your flask and you want to save your flask for, like, I don't know, like a big enemy or something. And the Ancestral Horn is very good because, you know, you get that nice little FP regen, so you can keep using your blood tax, which is going to be your main way of healing, and it's just going to get your health up there pretty quickly without using a single flask. Really good for exploring. I like this a lot. And in this clip, I'm doing the same thing, but I'm using Rykard's Great Rune, which is really good if you're dealing with a high amount of enemies. It's just unbelievable, like, how fast you can get up to max health with this Great Rune. It's insane. Like, I've literally almost died doing this test, and I just fucking got myself back up and was like, okay, I'm okay now. And you know, this combined with the talismans I'm rocking, I'm basically just invincible to these guys. Now, I'm sure there's going to be harder enemies in the DLC, it's going to be harder to get kills, but this is still really beneficial to you, and I really highly recommend using this Great Rune when it comes to exploring. So this is the setup I got for boss fighting. It's basically the exact same as the PvP setup, but I switched out the Spear Talisman for the Shard of Alexander because it's just not going to be too beneficial to get that extra counter damage when the bosses are probably just going to be wailing on you, and it's not like you can break their poise or anything. So this would be very beneficial to use your blood tax and get heals off of it and do that extra damage while you're doing it. So here I am helping my friend fight Radahn. Honestly, yeah, the build's doing pretty good damage on him, and I would say it's like the health regen is the biggest major part about it, because when you're helping somebody in co-op, being able to preserve your flask is amazing. It's honestly like the cream of the crop. And the damage is pretty decent as well. It's not horrible. It's not necessarily like fucking perfect. Like, let's say if you were using a Moonlight build, I'm sure you would do a lot more damage, but that's entirely missing the point. We're trading damage for survivability, which in my opinion is more favorable because the host has a high survivability chance. Let's say you're helping a noob, the fact that he has more health items than you means that he can stay longer than you. If you're running out of health items when you're halfway done with the fight, you're just fucked. You're just fucked. Especially when you're fighting bosses like Melania and shit. There's no way you can just keep going with no health items when you're like in second phase Melania. There's no fucking way. Unless you're like some kind of PvE god, like let me solo her or some shit. But like, let's be honest, most of you guys are not some kind of PvE god. So you gotta think about like how you can survive better when helping players. Overall, this build is great. Decent damage, high survivability. That's the whole concept. And I like it for that. When you're hosting, it's a different story. If you're fighting a boss, the Rykard's Great Rune isn't going to help you much because it doesn't do shit unless you kill something. So you can just use whatever you want, whatever is more helpful, you know what I mean? So yeah, that's the whole build video. Really put a lot of work into this video, and I will be uploading all the clips pretty soon, and I hope this was at least somewhat enjoyable to watch. Honestly, I invest so much time in these games, I'm just like, okay, might as well just like share some of the shit I do. Yeah, but thank you for watching. Come back soon, I'll probably upload another build video. Stay tuned if you like it. I know the quality's shit, but you know, I don't really have the equipment for better recording. Thank you for watching. Bye bye.